Good afternoon.
Benvenuti.
Welcome to this meeting, which I will briefly introduce. This is a meeting sponsored and promoted by the meeting of Rimini and also by the Inter-Party Group on Subsidiarity. This group that MPs and senators of all parties have developed, and the meeting has always given space to this group, believing profoundly in dialogue, in exchange, in the search for truth and solutions for the common good. Every year, the Inter-Party Group for Subsidiarity organizes meetings at the meeting. And today is the first meeting. And we are going to give the floor to an exceptional guest. The Intergroup, together with the meeting, has invited the governor of the Bank of Italy, Mario Draghi, and the governor of the central bank has accepted. It's a great honor, therefore, for us of the meeting to have Mario Draghi here with us for two reasons. First, because the governor of the Bank of Italy, as an institution in Italy, has and continues to have a role which goes well beyond the simple control of financial issues with regard to the currency and banks in general. The bank and the governor have an institutional role with regard to the political and economic life of the country, which is fundamental to assure the balance of the role of the state. And in particular, it's an honor for us to have Mario Draghi here as a figure, because, as you know, he has a long academic and institutional career behind him. He got a degree in Rome University under Professor Federico Caffè. He got his doctorate under Franco Modigliani at MIT, and he taught as a professor at the University of Professors. He was executive director of the World Bank, general director of the Treasury, and president of the Economic and Financial Committee of the EU, and partner and member of the Worldwide Management Committee of Goldman Sachs. He has published widely on monetary policy and international finance, and he has been in many other posts and had many awards and honors. Now, given his career and his presentations, which have shown the possibility for change of the economy of Italy in the field of structural change, training, renewal of the country as a whole, it is fundamental that we have him here to deal with a theme that we have given ourselves today, a way forward for Italy. And to bring in these new measures to bring in the changes that we all hope to see. So we're going to hear from the governor first, and then we're going to ask our guests, the Right Honourable Maurizio Lupi and the Right Honourable Luigi Bersani, to answer a few questions. So I'd like to invite the governor to speak, and we'd like once again to thank him for being here. I have many reasons for being thankful for this invitation today. First of all, the very kind of Professor Vittadini, but I'm also very grateful for this invitation on the part of the Inter-Party Parliamentary Group on Subsidiarity. And I'm also very thankful as well for the direct personal contact that I've been able to have with this situation and with you. I was accompanied on a small tour before, and for the first time I have seen at first hand what Comunione and Liberazione does over and above what the newspapers say. Thank you. Rather, more than being a presentation, mine is more like a conversation, at least in part. That's how I'd like to structure it. Now, the first observation I'd like to make is that about 2 years ago, in this period, we started seeing the signs of what, in fact, was to be the most violent, severe economic crisis since the last war, certainly, but perhaps ever. And in this very period, we started seeing the first signs of this crisis. And gradually we're coming out of this crisis now. I don't know whether to say that the worst has passed, because there are many risks which don't give me certainty with regard to the permanence of these positive signs. I wouldn't say, therefore, that this crisis has passed, because Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, says that the crisis is when we have gone back to where we were before, not just because when the worst is over, but the data today on production orders in the US and the index of confidence of German consumers, industrial production in the euro area, all these figures would tend to indicate that at least there are a few swallows around. I know one swallow doesn't make a summer or a spring, as you say in Italy, but I think there are positive signs. Two things, however, should be said. First of all, it could have been worse. The violence of the initial shock of this crisis is probably harsher than that of 1929. What we didn't have was the consequences of that initial shock. In other words, the crisis started worse, but the consequences on the economy aren't in any way comparable to the 1929 crisis. Why? Because the world then had two characteristics. The international divisions of political divisions prevented any sort of cooperation between the countries and the authorities of those countries. Second characteristics, the response of economic policy at that time was very slow, contradictory, and uncertain. This was not the case now. The response, first of all, of the central banks with an extraordinary issuing of liquidity onto the market, which was coordinated worldwide, stopped and had a first impact. And we see, in fact, this, and President Obama's words, in fact, showed that he was grateful, and he expressed this to Bernanke yesterday. Secondly, also, measures continue to be brought forward with regard to budgetary measures and support for the economy. And the reason why we see positive signs now is that these government programs are beginning to have their effect. And this expansive monetary policy is beginning to kickstart the economy. The second consideration is that the cost, however, of this crisis has been very heavy in economic, social, and human terms. And it's a crisis which has not known borders. It's a global crisis. The violence, the harshness of this cost, the globality of the cost and the crisis has meant that everywhere there is a sensation of going back to normalcy. This is impossible. There is no real will to go back to how things were before. In other words, the agenda today is founded on 2 points. First of all, reforming the financial system, the regulation of the financial system and financial services. And here, the Financial Stability Board that I chair is the executor of these new rules. But more generally, more widely, it is thought that structural reforms are necessary. Think of President Obama's program. He launched health, climate and environmental structural changes, and also the role that governments have in the workings of the economy. These are all things which come to bear. This sensation that things have to be very deeply changed is a sensation which is widespread, and this is the result that the crisis has had. And I think that for us too, the time has arrived to enact these changes, not just because of the sentiment of desire for profound change, but also for another reason. It's there. We went into the crisis already growing very slowly, perhaps one of the slowest growths in the Euroland. It was a low growth which had lasted for 15 years. We went into the crisis with a gap vis-à-vis other European countries which we had accumulated over 15 years. The crisis left Italy in a difficult situation. Investments have gone down, and the capital used for production has gone down, therefore. And unemployment, in fact, could destroy, and unemployment could, in fact, ruin skills and cause a decline. And this means that Italy will be very hard hit. And coming out of the crisis is difficult for Italy. Going back to growth, especially, will be particularly difficult. Even the low growth of previously will be difficult, and that's why we need those structural reforms so dearly to solve those barriers which prevented us over the last 10, 15 years before the crisis from growing well. These structural nodes which impede the Italian economy are many, and I don't intend to list them. They're fairly well known. I'd like to rapidly concentrate on 3 of these. The first has to do with human capital, human resources. I've talked about this on other occasions, but I think it's still very important. The first thing that you see is that in Italy there's a sort of vicious circle abroad. In other words, being educated, especially having an education at the university level, pays less in terms of career and rewards, pays less than in other similar European countries. And the result of this is that perhaps unconsciously families invest less in education than is done in other countries, and enterprises, businesses adopt technologies which are less modern than they perhaps could adopt if the people they hired were more highly educated. So it's a vicious circle, and one asks oneself why. The answer especially is in the scant ability of our educational system to point the way. Our educational system of high schools, university, does not point up and point out merit and value of students. So what can we do? So what can we do? Here, the key words as to what to do is competition, information, autonomy, and fairness. Competition. We have to ensure that the various schools compete among each other, and I'll read you some data. The mark must become a reliable indication of achievement, and therefore uniform texts must be carried out, as happens in the lower high schools. And also this must be followed by adequate information with regard to the schools, with regard to achievement levels vis-à-vis the starting level of students and so on. So we have to have fairness, but also merit being indicated and given reward. And also we have to have in competition between schools, and parents must be able to know how good that school is, and also financing must be in part linked to the merit of the school. All schools should have greater independence and autonomy in the choice of teachers, and those with the best results should be able to get financial incentives because of their good results. But what else happens in this vicious circle if we don't solve the problem? What happens is that the low quality of teaching and education and the failure to point up merit discourages, in fact, enterprises taking a further step forward. In other words, enterprises looking for to hire, in fact, tend to lower the salaries to compensate the higher risk. They don't know, in fact, whom they are hiring, so they lower the risk by paying them less. Now, a great deal has been done. Progress has been significant in recent years, and similar mechanisms to what I have just mentioned for schools have been proposed and in part brought into practice in our universities, which according to university index don't in fact come up to the universities of advanced countries. So we have to have reform from university right through to the school, but I think that the civil objective of allowing all children and students without any distinction to have a just and good education doesn't mean necessarily a poor education just because it's extended to everybody. The second structural aspect that I'd like to talk about is the labour market. The recession thus far in Italy has not, in fact, caused a great deal of unemployment. I say thus far and not so much increased unemployment. This is compared to other countries. But the hours worked have gone down considerably. This because of the recourse to redundancy fund. In July, the recourse to the extraordinary redundancy fund went up by 35% compared to the previous month, net of seasonal effects. And also the temporary workers, contract workers are especially affected. Their contracts aren't renewed, and this especially in SMEs. Our labour market in recent years has become much more flexible than it has ever been previously, and this flexibility has extraordinary benefits. For example, in the case of the crisis, this flexibility allowed companies to reuse staff and set them aside, but then take them up again when production increased. But on this question, there was a recent discussion with regard to the condition of the enterprise having to be in line with the salaries which are given. A great deal has been discussed about this with regard to the difference in salaries between South and North and so on. In our view, the real salaries are practically comparable in the North and the South, but we don't want to and we don't think there should be further constraints put on salaries, as has been suggested, but rather there should be decentralization and flexibility in collective bargaining. We think that this is what is being brought in by the social partners, especially the enhancement of what's called second level or company level collective bargaining. But we have to have flexibility in costs. Uncertainty introduces difficulties, and also this means and is filtered down to a personal level. People don't spend, and therefore we have lower consumption, and people put aside money because they're fearful for the future and so on. So what can we do in a situation like this? The answer, again, is something which the Bank of Italy has talked about on other times. We have to have an organic reform of the so-called social measures, and we have to have certainty of salary, and we have to have the social measures which are commensurate with the person's position, and we have to have coverage which is extended to all those who are in search of a job, not just coverage to those that are not looking for a job. And therefore, we have to definitely have a strengthening of the inspections and the checks and controls, so that the system of social security measures is not abused, which in fact would call into question the consensus around the strengthening of these social security measures. Now, this leads me to another aspect where I think that several strides forward have been taken, not in an organic form on the basis of the crisis. In other words, I have the feeling that we are close to this thing more in fact than in theory. But I think that nonetheless we have to take the final step, i.e. putting together all the things that have been brought in, add something, and really have a system of social security measures which is modern and which is comparable to what most of the other countries have. The benefits are considerable, not only the removal of that uncertainty that I talked of before, but also there's an ease with which workers can change and go to different sectors or different enterprises. The third structural node that I'd like to talk of today is the North-South issue, the North-South difference in Italy. It's a complex thing, and it was born with the very unity of Italy. So obviously it's not an easy theme to go into and describe. Carlo Azeglio Ciampi, when he was the President of the Republic, also dedicated himself to this. And in the autumn, the Bank of Italy is going to have a congress on this. I would like to just make two observations here. If we go back in time, when you think of the so-called Mezzogiorno, Southern Italian fund, it wasn't a bad fund when it made infrastructure. It was when, rather than making bridges and roads, the Mezzogiorno fund started to give incentives to production and so on. That's when things started to come apart. And therefore, this makes me think that the financing must be limited to removing what economists call negative externalities. In other words, the things that the private sector cannot deal with, public order, bridges, roads, and so on. But it mustn't be handouts which privilege certain companies to the detriment of others. Otherwise, the only effect is to suffocate competition, and de facto, that is a factor of underdevelopment and not of development. Thank you. The second observation is one of method. We have discussed at length, and we will continue to discuss what we should do, ordinary, extraordinary laws, measures, decrees, and so on. But one thing I will say, not as a politician, and I'm not a politician, is this. If we take a catalogue of laws, if you like, on judiciary, administration, on the rubbish collection, on the health assistance, education, for example, the health bill is the same in the north, the south, and the centre, but the results and what is achieved is very, very different. And that means that there's an exodus from the south, people going to the north to look for good health care. And also the law on competition is the same everywhere. The administration of justice and so on. These are laws which cover the whole of Italy, but their application produces in the south lower performances in the north, and does so on a consistent level. So the conclusion is that the laws can be right or wrong, but per se, it's not the laws that have an effect on the South. It's their application of these laws which is different. So rather than invent new laws, we have to invest in application of existing laws. This is the condition that is necessary to ensure this, and let me say this as a governor of the Bank of Italy, the basic condition is financial stability. I mean, without financial stability, you don't do anything. And financial stability is supported by two pillars, the good public finances and growth. Without growth, you can't get over and eliminate the public deficit. For example, the deficit was 105% in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, and in 2010 it will be 118%, 13 points more of public deficit, which is not so much because we spend more, but because we had, in fact, a different GDP. And history shows us that a high public debt can only be got over, not by increasing taxes, but by the economy growing. And when we had the possibility of having an independent monetary policy, we used inflation and deflation and so on. We don't have this policy anymore, so we have to aim for growth, go for growth. So maintaining financial stability is only strengthened by those reforms that I mentioned before. Those reforms are necessary to relaunch growth. Growth is essential to maintain financial stability, and this ensures the framework for these reforms. Now, we are not starting from scratch, however. We do have strong points that we can bring to bear, and several of them. The first strong point is our enterprises, our companies. And if you allow me, many companies have shown that they have been able to modernize from a technological and organizational point of view. They have shifted from their original sector, gone into new, more technologically intense sector. We are still lagging behind in terms of competition, but we have before us a dynamic picture. In other words, many entrepreneurs know how to do their job well, and even if certain other entrepreneurs are suffering because of the crisis, and here a fundamental role is played by the banks. I've already said that this, in fact, is a test for bankers. One has to be able to do one's banking business well, even if things are going badly. In other words, one has to be able to extend credit Thank you. It means being able to extend credit to companies that one thinks, on the basis of data, can overcome the crisis, and nonetheless being very prudential with regard to those companies that you think won't be able to make it, not because of their structural issues, but because they are companies that anyway would have gone to the wall. So our strong points are the companies, our businesses. The second is our foreign workers. And here I must say something right away. This is a real resource only if we can govern the economic and social integration of these foreign workers. Because otherwise we will have a situation that economists define as one in which the private benefits are greater or lower than the social costs. In other words, if you can't govern this process, the social costs outstrip the benefits that one has from the work of foreign workers. But we have no alternative because the figures are incredible. Up to 20 years ago, we had a negative balance, but we have seen an increase in 3.4 million new modern workers. That's 6% of the population, and 0.3 million, in fact, don't have aren't official. The foreign workers are younger. They, in fact, are less educated, but they carry out low salary, low paid, but essential jobs. However, we don't see appreciable negative consequences for jobs being given to Italian because of the presence of these foreign workers. And these are studies which are comparable to other countries. So we have to govern, however, the process. We can't just let it go. And also we must combat the process of marginalization of foreign students and pupils within the Italian educational system. And this has been pointed up already in the primary school. The immigrants' children tend to lag behind and very often are dropouts. And another quite extraordinary factor, exercises or projections have said that by 2050, about 1/3 of the people resident in Italy who are under 24 will have at least one foreign parent. And this is in line with what is seen in Canada and the US today. So that means that the foreign component of the Italian population will be all important to determine the quality of human capital, on which, of course, our economy is based. And this will determine the growth rate of the economy. So this is a resource only if we can govern the economic and social integration of the new foreign workers. But we have no choice in this. It's not an objective that we can step aside from, nor do we want to step aside from it, because much of what we see as negative in this phenomenon is due to the fact that we, in fact, have sidestepped an attempt to govern the phenomenon. And then we have another strong point, and that is the progress which has already been achieved. Many things have been developed in the last few years. Significant steps forward have been taken with regard to reforming the educational system and the labour market, and also trying to increase the competition in traditionally protected sectors, especially the reform of public administration. This should be mentioned and is key. And then also there's a considerable reform ongoing, that is a tax reform, and this will directly impact on all structural issues, especially the three questions I mentioned. The Bank of Italy has underlined often that a necessary condition for tax reform to produce effects is that this must be effective and not virtual. There must be a close link between expenses and the money financed. And I'll also underline the need for solidarity. The other sort of the other key point that we have is, I think, specific. We can analyze the first three strong points, and they come together, if you like, and a wide political spectrum is agreed thereto, and people agree on the urgency of these reforms, which must be started or accelerated. And if this is generally accepted, therefore, that these reforms are necessary, the next question is there a basic consensus with regard to the real reforms which are to be brought in? I think that the whole question of competition, talent, education, and so on, these things are all accepted by every political hue. We have to, in fact, go against corporativism and unearned income. I think that we all agree that these things have to be combated today in our country. Equal opportunities must also include the less capable, thanks to the increase of general efficiency. But there is a risk that in fact, the original distribution of talent or the different possibilities of development will be seen only for specifically privileged families. So this is where the whole question of solidarity comes in. The relationship between Christian solidarity and public measures is something which the Pope has mentioned. Ethical considerations must be taken into account and are taken into account increasingly by economic theory, something which economic theory previously did not take into account. The three structural problems of the Italian economy that I mentioned before require both opening up to merit and solidarity, the search for fairness, but also allowing the most meritorious to come to the fore. And all children, in other words, must have an adequate education without privilege, which would be unacceptable ethically. And we have to have a system of universal security measures. But to do this, we have to have greater efficiency and to have, but at the same time, we must ensure coverage to every one of the Italian citizens. And this means that we also have to bring up people living in the south to the level of the north, which would in fact benefit the whole of the Italian economy. So, as you can see, efficiency and fairness, merit and fairness, these things go hand in hand. Before I conclude, I'd like to tell you something that sprung to my mind while I was coming here. It's, if you like, a personal story. My father, between the two wars, in Germany, he saw on a monument in Germany an inscription, and he told me about this, and I was struck by it. The inscription on the monument said, "If you have lost your money, you have lost nothing, because with your good business sense, you can recover the money. If you've lost your honor, you have lost a great deal, but with a heroic act, you can recoup this honor. But if you have lost your courage, you have lost everything." Well, I have the impression that we have this courage, that this courage very often is abroad. We don't really know that we have it at times, but we do have it, and a lot of it. And I think it's this sharing of the diagnosis and the therapy for the treatment. This is where we have to start from. Overcoming our individual aspects and not denying our individuality, but going beyond them. And this is the way in which we can overcome the crisis. Thank you.
Ringraziamo.
I thank the Governor of the Bank of Italy, Mr. Draghi, for these words, for his contribution to this meeting, which is dedicated to knowledge. And he has given us many insights for further thoughts and considerations. And from this respect, the possibility to go deeper into these insights can start immediately with the contributions by Maurizio Lupi and Pier Luigi Bersani. And the first question I'm asking is to comment on Mr. Draghi's consideration. And first of all, I leave the floor to Pier Luigi Bersani.
Grazie, buonasera a tutti.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon. I don't want to trivialize with some considerations a very complex and articulated contribution. And I would like to dwell on a few issues. So the first refers to what Mario Draghi said regarding the lessons to be drawn from the recent crisis. So the way forward is a long one in order to go back to the starting point, to the level we were before the crisis started. And there's also a lesson to be drawn so that we won't repeat the errors that have brought us to the current crisis. And we should consider the aspects related to finance, and finance has become in the past years a real force, and it will be very difficult to control it and to make sure that it will be confined to its original functions. And Mario Draghi also spoke about the need to correct the economic policies. And if we have fallen into this crisis, the economic policies are partly to blame. The President of the United States is speaking about interventions on the welfare system. The United States have been redistributing wealth by helping production, by helping the welfare system, and much has been redistributed through credit cards. In China, all attention and all funds were spent on production. And in general, in the world, somebody thought that by enriching finance, all would have gained money from it. So you can't think that if 10% of the population becomes very wealthy, one can eat 10 times per day, because this is not possible. So the idea to go back to the fundamentals, so the idea that you cannot be well if all the others are not at least living well. So the idea of a common good is a rational idea from an economic viewpoint. It is a rational idea. It's not an irrational idea. So trying to address inequalities means making sure that the economic system becomes more healthy. And we have to do something in order to get to this point, and this is one of the main lessons from the recent crisis. Then there is another point I want to stress, and this has to do with the peculiar situation in which Italy is. So we entered the current recession after other countries, and it will take us longer to get out of the crisis, also considering the context in which Italy is living, which is characterized by a very low growth rate. Our businesses need open markets. We have been processing for centuries raw materials which we do not have, and we have developed advanced technologies. But our businesses don't have freedom to do their business, and they are stifled by the Italian banking system and finance system. In the past few years, there has been an extraordinary restructuring system. New challenges have been taken up by small businesses. They have embarked on innovation, technological innovation, and they have indebted themselves in order to pursue innovation. But they are the driving force of Italy. And the risk of this crisis is that there will be a selection of these businesses. In France, the government is defending their businesses. In Italy, there are thousands of enterprises which may not have the stimulus and the force to survive. It's not a point of they not having a market or not having the right product. It's a point of giving credit to them. And with regard to the education system and with regard to the human capital, I would like to say that every time that businesses have embarked on innovation, they have immediately changed their professional mix, because they suddenly needed experts in specific sectors, so experts in information systems, experts in other advanced technological systems. And this is a driver, this is a driving force for training and education system. So the research, so businesses must so stimulate universities to train the human capital in an effective way. We must strengthen the businesses and our enterprises. As far as the economic stimulus is concerned, so Draghi said that the GDP debt ratio is made out of two things. If you don't give stimulus, then the stagnation will ensue. It takes courage, of course, And this is also the heart of the matter in the discussion we had with the government, with the current majority. There is no point in reallocating resources which are already present in the national budget. A reform is needed. And this is the task of the government. And this is a country that has the courage to address the problems, but the government must recognize the problems. And this is a precondition. And then one last point, and this concerns the South-North divide. When the so-called wage cages were introduced, they were introduced in a period in which there were backward areas also in northern Italy, not only in the south of Italy. So the situation was different. And then another phase started, which marked the exclusivity of the North-South divide. And in 30, 40 years, we haven't been able to reduce this divide. We have not even found a way to do it. And now we are here with political measures which, instead of combating this divide, is just trying to interpret it. Politicians are disillusioned and think that nothing can be done to reduce this divide. But I think that there is a way to do it, and it takes effective measures to innovate Southern Italy enterprises. We must now decide how we want to become Italian, because the unity of Italy is not just a concept to be defended, but also involves concrete action and effective action, not only words.
Anch'io vorrei reagire alle...
I would like to express my opinion and make some considerations. I see many friends and many colleagues, from Bonetti to Farina, my friend Sposetti, and many others who I'm not mentioning, but who will also take part in the meeting of Friday. And I would like to thank the Governor of the Bank of Italy for accepting this invitation. This is also a recognition of the job made by the Inter-Party Parliamentary Group for Subsidiarity. This group was set up under a centre-right party in 2002. Then it continued under the centre-left majority and is continuing its job now. So my contribution will not be exhaustive because there is not enough time, but I would like to react to the suggestions made by Draghi and by Bersani. I think that the risk is that the conclusive words of Mr. Draghi apparently have nothing to do with the way forward for building a new Italy. And the governor, so by speaking of his father, introduced the concept of courage. You can lose everything, but if you lose courage, you won't overcome the crisis. If you don't have the courage to regain your freedom, so you can lose everything, but you will be courageous still. So there may be thousands of extraordinary plans to overcome the crisis, but unless courage is there, Italy won't find its way forward, its way out of the crisis. Very often within the inter-party parliamentary group, we have been discussing the issues of optimism and confidence and trust. Somebody said that with too much optimism, one risks forgetting the dramatic situation. But every day I have a demonstration of the fact that the very strength of Italy is the willingness to get out of the crisis and to take up the challenge. And this requires courage, this requires determination. So whatever the plan, whatever the reform, courage is a precondition and determination is a precondition. And we all share the importance of education. Education is a precondition. The big ones in the world, the experts and intellectuals, have come together to discuss the economic problems and have mentioned the concepts of charity and courage. They all mentioned the concept of subsidiarity. This crisis has been an opportunity to rediscover what were thought to be weaknesses. What is the biggest social damper we have discovered in this period of crisis? A man, a human being, when he loses his job, so he finds shelter and refuge in the family. So this is the basic concept. And the family is where you can find the courage and determination to fight against the adversities of life. During the campaign, I was in Prato with Formigoni, with the president of the Lombardy region. And there have been entrepreneurs in Prato, in that region, who committed suicide because of the crisis, because he saw his enterprise fail. And the Compagnia delle Opere was distributing handouts and leaflets which were saying Prato should not close its businesses. And they mentioned a very important sentence: desire is what prompts individuals and human beings to improve their lot. So desire and the heart or the reason are what motivate people to improve their destiny and their lot. So optimism. Very often Berlusconi spoke of the importance of optimism. Courage, as the governor of the Bank of Italy said, So they are a precondition, and subsidiarity embodies the idea of a society where the individual is in the very service and where politics are in the service and in the best interest of the individual. Can we draw some lessons from the crisis? So we are still discussing, we are again discussing about ethics. We are again discussing social economy. And as Luigi Bersani said, we are responsible for the government and we are responsible for the reforms. But if we all share these values, then we can be ready for the challenge. I think that this is the biggest resource and the biggest strength of this country. And the press must finally recognize that there is an exceptional Italy. There are individuals who, despite the crisis, think that with their work they can meet their desire for profit and they can contribute for the common good with their work. So I think that this is the first important issue. So this must be a fundamental precondition for those who are called upon to make political decisions and introduce reforms. And the three strengths brought forward by the governor of the Bank of Italy are important. And he rightly said that we are not starting from scratch because many important steps forwards have already been made. I would like to conclude by emphasizing the importance of the family and the human capital. Here there is a big challenge. The Minister for Education, Mrs. Gelmini, is present in this room. I would like to stress the importance of a reform of the education system that focuses on the individual and on merit. The tax federalism, this will be an important reform. Federalism is a big challenge for us, and I would like to stress what the Parliament has done. For the first time, a new methodology was followed for tax federalism. A very important discussion has been started, and dialogue with the opposition was an important element of innovation. I see some positive signs. And great progress was also made with regard to the issue of the South-North divide. I think that there is one last issue, and I, as a representative of the ruling class, will take it upon myself to take up the challenge mentioned by Draghi. I think that this country can be changed. So the fear to lose consensus should no longer determine what we do. The trust is there, and we have been able to gain the trust of the citizenships thanks to our practical and hands-on approach. And we must really reform our country, and we will be judged based on our ability to do it and to implement the reforms.
Seconda ultima domanda.
The second and last question, as we are the intergroup, it's a political question, and we have this aim, political aim. I was struck by the presentation of the Pope. He said that knowledge does not take place without, in fact, having affect. And that means that for years, the political class perhaps should not for years have had feelings, emotions, and involvement. Is this the case, or is there another aspect of the political parties really involved in the humus of life? So this, who is the political party, and what do politicians really have to do? Are politicians just people that go along with what the party says, or do we have politicians that are really part of their constituency, linked and involved in their constituency? I see somebody here who's been a parliamentarian for 25 years, and he had 98% presence in Parliament because he was really involved in the questions which assailed members of his constituency. I mean, is this something which is right, or is it too partisan? Let me start from one thing, what Luigi Bersani said at the press conference today. Let me start with that. The responsibility that each of us have in the choice of becoming a politician, and I accepted to be part of the Partito della Libertà to bring about a large, great party. This was a feeling and involvement that I felt and wanted to be part of. We have secular as well as people with religious views that come together in this party. When Pierluigi Bersani was asked by journalists why he came to the Rimini meeting, as he is now today candidate for the secretary of the New Democratic Party, he said, we like to wish him all the best in his candidature for the secretary, as secretary of the party. And he said, you know, obviously it might be a wasted day because I'm not going to collect many votes here at the Rimini meeting. But he says that politics is something broader and wider than that. Someone, he said, might decide one day to, if you like, waste a day for an electoral campaign, but dedicate a day to the common good of the country. And I think that this is the real crux of the matter. And he answered well. And it unites me, it unites my many friends who are here today, because that day that we decided to commit ourselves to politics and decide which side to take, we made a choice, but it was a choice which started from our experience, and we wanted to put it, however, to the service of the common good, a word which is often forgotten or which is on the lips of many people, but it seems to be gratuitous. Politics is the highest form of charity that man can have, Paul VI said. Is it right, and is this the case for everybody? And then when you ask about what party you want, and you want as a ruling party, well, here we have an enormous challenge. We who have decided to form this new great party of the Popolo della Libertà. It's a fascinating challenge and brings us together and is the cause of great consensus. We talked among friends the other day, and we realized that if we didn't have the sensation that there is this consensus vis-à-vis the Popolo della Libertà Party and its values and its proposals, what it is putting forward in terms of political values, if we didn't have this sensation that there was that consensus there among the people, where we would have got everything wrong. We have a clear road ahead of us. We have a clear vision of where we want to go, and that's why we have banded together. Many of us come from the Catholic tradition. Some of us were part of the Christian Democrat Party. But the real challenge is that in politics today, in some real important questions, believers, non-believers, secular and religious people come together, because the idea that the family is the center around which we must build our country, the idea of subsidiarity, is something that we all have in common. And I think this is the point of departure, and I say this to Luigi Bersani. This can help us see the opposing party under different eyes. This is a legislature in which we have a majority and opposition, and everybody accuses each other. But in this legislation, I think we can have a really good debate, because starting from the common good, from the same concepts, the proposals are different, certainly, but not that the other person's proposal is the demon, is evil. No. I said that yesterday that I voted on the law of immigration law, I'm convinced that we have to regulate immigration. And I was offended when I was told that I was a racist because I voted in favor of the new immigration law. This does not allow me in that way to get to the crux of the problem. And this law helps to guarantee the dignity of the individual. And it was almost as if giving and voting laws goes against human dignity and integration. We have a culture in our Popolo della Libertà in which we have brought in things that need not be in contradiction, where the reformism is not just talking to the emotions. We want to and we can really question things in depth for the common good. And if we succeed in doing this, I think that this will be a good for the country. Each of us, in the particular role he or she has within the particular party, can set this aside. This is the commitment that I take today. Let me answer Vittadini's question thus. Well, a party is a means, not an ends. The ends is society, Italy, our ideals. And, I mean, I am called a party member and a proponent of the party system, and people accuse me of saying that I want to recreate the Christian Democrats and the party system, and I say no, I want to recreate an association, a series of associations like Avis, like the Blood Donation Association. They're an association that is a vehicle for other things, to collect blood and give it to other people, and they create limits for themselves. I mean, if you're a person who's normal, you have to abide by certain laws. If you belong to Avis, you have to carry out blood tests when they tell you. So I think that politics is a series of associations that have external purposes, if you like. Is it a war machine? No, no. It's an open system. I think, and I'm not just talking about my party, I think parties must be very open. They must involve citizens, electors, but these electors and citizens ask of the parties to be there to show what they represent. And they say, well, you're not a party member, you're not an elector. I don't think there's any difference between a party member and a non-party member. Very often, when I was distributing flyers, many people say, well, you know, how come you only turn up when it's election time? And it's not the party member that asks you that, it's the ordinary citizen that says this. So I think the parties must redevelop their strong link with the people using innovations, technologies, but they have to have a physical rapport with the community, because otherwise, if you don't go out and look people directly in the eyes, you won't be understood. It's not just a back office activity. And then with regard to the question of Vittadini again, I am very much against a Jacobin idea. I'm against an evanescent idea of party. I'm against a Jacobin idea of the party. I like people too much to go along with that. And I think that we should think of ourselves along the lines of being self-organized, think of emancipation, growth, the acquiring of emancipation, equal opportunities. And seeing the examples of today, here, for example, if I think in 10 years' time, what am I going to say to a young person that we of our party were born of the Margarito, the ADS, and they wouldn't understand. A young person 10 years' time wouldn't understand and wouldn't know about those parties. I mean, I want to make the party of the century, but I mean, I wouldn't even talk to him about the so-called historic compromise. These are things that are part of the past. I would take things even more widely, go back even further in the past, because the roots are our horizons. These horizons are the roots that you recall and that you go back to. These are our future horizons. And therefore, I prefer to look into these, and where there is a movement of emancipation and self-organization. I mean, in 2011, we have to think about our history and where we're going. Fundamental roots that gave rise to the great popular parties, in fact, were born outside the higher echelons of society. The socialists weren't in the parliament. The Catholics were, in fact, in the lower echelons. The very first social, political movement of our country was born like that, if you like. Not from a definite policy, and I would not like this to be lost. It's not being hostile or a rebel. It's emancipation. It means that if you are on the side of the weaker person, the person who works, that you can make a society which is better for everybody. This was true in the past and will be true and must be true in the future. I mean, of course, then you have to renew, because we live in the new century and so on. But This is our basic mindset. And I hope that politics reacquires its dignity. I mean, in November, we're going to talk about 1989 and the fall of the wall. I mean, let's this time talk about our wall. We had walls in our own home, like other countries. The wall fell, and this had an impact here. And the impact was to delegitimize the policy and cause disaffection in politics. But politics are necessary. We have to have credible politics. This is really what we need. We can't do without this. So when November comes round, let's really talk and think along these lines.
Due conclusioni a questo incontro.
So a few words of conclusion. The title of this meeting is Knowledge is an Event. We all appreciated the intervention by the Governor of the Bank of Italy. As already said, his proposals are significant and important, and we are starting to acquire more knowledge, and what must move us is not political passion and the impetus of feelings. What is more important is knowledge. If we acquire knowledge, we can serve the common good. And with our intelligence, with our courage, and with our passion, we must pursue common good. We want to learn what has been said and take upon ourselves to work for the common good. In the second part of this conference, we have seen that there can be different positions, but these different positions can converge in the passionate search for common good. We have heard different positions from Lupi and Bersani. The parties are instruments that can work towards the search for truth and towards common good. So we go away from this debate with a great passion for politics, for constructing something which is valuable and which is in the best interests of society. Thank you for your